Olpianus and Moinar make the stage way too easy, so I thought I'd try doing it with 5 stars. It ended up being a lot more difficult than I was expecting, at least with the limitations Maleknights forces you to work with. For a while I thought it might actually be impossible. 3 of the 4 boss phases demand very different things from your team, so squad space ended up being the main limiting factor for the clear. Eventually I was able to find a way to clear it with 13 operators, which is never super satisfying, but with Vector Breakthrough coming out soon, I'm ready to put the stage behind me. For the record though, I think it might be possible to do this without Tequila. Phase 1 is the only place where physical damage is a threat. In normal mode, it's possible to tank the boss with an Arts Defender, but annoyingly in challenge mode I need to bring out a defense-oriented defender like Bison. With the challenge condition, I also need to hold off on using launching second S2, meaning there's also a DP limitation here. I need to get baseline out early enough to block the first swordsman, since Bison can't handle them while tanking the boss. But we also need to get enough DPS out fast enough to kill the early mobs, otherwise the boss will just walk right through Bison. Also, if the swordsmen are on the field long enough, they'll start killing baseline. Once we do get everyone out though, the stall is theoretically infinite. Noel's regular healing isn't enough to keep Bison alive while his skill is offline, but launching S2 offers 15 seconds of healing, and Noel S2 gives 12 seconds of heal over time, recharging in 20 seconds. We need to use Bison's S2 to give baseline enough defense to survive the swordsman, and chaining a Noel S2 into launching S2 into another Noel S2 gives enough healing to cover the 15 seconds it takes for that skill to recharge. Phase 2 is where the Arts multi-hit attack and the true damage AoE get introduced. As far as I can tell, Noel is the only 5-star male medic that can deal with the true damage AoE, since his S2 is a multi-target heal over time. The weak link here is definitely Seiza, who will die if he doesn't get Noel's S2 during the true damage AoE. This means I need to wait for the AoE to do 1 tick of damage before activating Noel's S2 to guarantee that Seiza doesn't have the highest percent HP. Aside from that, there's not really much to talk about here. I definitely think this is the easiest phase of the 4. Once I replace Bison with Aerscarp and repeat launching, the team has enough healing and resistances to stall the boss forever, so long as you don't miss a Noel S2 activation. About a month ago I made a joke about how Windflit was finally useful because of the Chapter 15 mechanic. But I think this clear is the first time I actually used Windflit for the purpose he was designed for. Since the boss is flying in Phase 3, we can't block the boss unless we bring a Sky Ranger like Contrail. But that's not an option yet in Maleknights, though. So Phase 3 basically becomes a DPS check. That itself also brings its own challenges, since Maleknights doesn't have very many options for buffing and debuffing, especially once you start excluding 6 stars. And since Seiza is the only sniper I can use that does a meaningful amount of damage to the boss, I'm stuck with bringing in a caster and Windflit. I'm using Canny Palette here, since its talent gives Arts Fragility to flying units. Combined with 2 Windflit devices, it's still not enough DPS to kill the boss. I ended up having to also bring in Aerscarp, who gives Seiza a little bit of attack speed, but more importantly his S1 can slow the boss, which keeps him in range of Canny Palette long enough to kill. Just barely. Annoyingly, I also need to deploy Wanqing here for a few seconds, just to take some of the healing pressure off of Noel, and to tank one of the boss's arts hits. Now we're in the Phase 3 to Phase 4 transition. I buy time to redeploy my operators by stalling the dog with Bison. Like before, Herald's healing isn't enough to keep Bison alive when he's off his skill, but we can stagger Wanqing's S2 and Herald's S2, which have a combined uptime of 40 seconds to keep Bison alive. Narcorn is also deployed to deal with the swordsmen that come in Phase 4. Since the swordsmen get buffed over time, he's strong enough to solo them in front of the red box. I'm not sure if he's the best operator to use here. I've lost about a third of my attempts at Phase 4 due to leaking a swordsman, but I'll always take any opportunity I can to pull him out. As far as I can see, there's roughly 4 ways to tackle Phase 4. Option 1 is to use a super tanky operator like Alpianus to tank the boss. And option 2 is to spawn kill the boss as he comes out of the red box with someone like Moinar. Unfortunately, both of these are completely out of the question for 5-star Maleknights. The third option is to retreat all the operators on the left 2/3 of the map, and wait for the boss and the 2 casters to group up near the blue box, and then dump out as many things onto the field at once. I was able to do this in normal mode, but it's just not feasible in challenge mode. Since Noel is the only medic that can deal with the boss's true damage AoE, I need to redeploy him, which, with the challenge condition, costs roughly 60 DP. This leaves around 40 DP to deploy operators, and at this point of the stage, most operators have already been deployed once already. The last option is to punt the 2 casters into the hole, which is also a challenge because Maleknights doesn't have any hookmasters yet. But it's still the most viable solution here. And it's possible by deploying Enforcer and juggling the targeting of the first caster. I pretty much have to play this part at 1x speed. There's just too much time-sensitive stuff happening all over the map. If I miss a Narcorn skill activation, I leak a swordsman. If I don't use Enforcer's skill on the first caster fast enough, he'll die to the second caster. If I don't juggle the caster's attacks correctly, Noel will die. If I miss a Noel S2, Noel will die. If I don't bait the boss's multi-hit attack just before he gets into range of Journey, Journey will take a full 5 hits and die to the next true damage AoE. But once the casters and swordsmen are dead, and the boss has multiple targets in range, it's relatively smooth sailing. I think it might be possible to get rid of Tequila from this clear. It would probably involve deploying Journey last instead of first. It has the added benefit of Journey taking more arts damage, which is always good. It might also be possible to optimize Journey out. I mainly use Journey because with his S2 he's capable of tanking a full 5 hits from the boss. But by coordinating my deployments with my retreats, I do have enough deployment points to put out Air Scarp to bait the attack. I think the main mistake I made in Phase 4 is deploying Bison and not retreating Enforcer. Both operators have no resistances, and they pull the boss's arts attack off journey and baseline, meaning a higher healing requirement, which eventually pulls Noel's healing off the operators around him, and that in turn pulls Harold's healing off of himself, causing him to die. It messes up my plans a little bit, but ultimately the DPS from Air Scarp is probably the least important part of this strategy. So it's okay. And I can keep him alive a little bit with launching Zest too. And that's all I have to say about this clear.
You even managed to anticipate their ambush, Doctor. I guess there's no shame in them losing like that. I still have much to learn.